Hey everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5-Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Ladies, gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to episode 900 of 5-Yard Rush. 900 episodes. That is like 3-point-something years if you did one a day every day. Obviously, we haven't done that many. Murf has done a fair few. As you can hear him. Murf, happy 900th birthday. Well, episode. You know what I mean?
900th birthday. That'd be a bigger show, I think.
I tell you what, the foundations we put down. If this gets to episode 900th birthday, if there is a 900th, like, yeah, we're nearly 3,000 millennia there. It's man, what a ride! 900.
I know, 900 episodes. Like, it's actually mental when you sit there and you work out all the content we put out. And I had great fun at the weekend putting out sort of just 9 episodes from the vault. And just you think back to some of the names that we've had on over the years. You think back to some of the things we've put out. It is wild. Like, it is genuinely like mental. That we're still going. That, you know, we'll get to 1,000. We still got people listening to us, which is just even more baffling. I guess I thought we would give up by now. But yeah, mate, it's just awesome, isn't it? Like, this is just a highlight of the week to do this with you and to put out the content and to keep going along. And, you know, we've built an amazing community. And I remember the first couple of podcasts I was on, and I said, you know, the mission was to have no one playing in a random NFL.com league anymore. And I feel like with the growth of the UK fantasy community over the last 7-ish years, through some of the work that we've done, and then people taking on that charge as well and creating leagues and creating competitions, like 7 years ago, would never have imagined running the amount of leagues that we run. I would never have imagined being in the amount of leagues that we're in, running all the charity competitions that we do, plus all the charity competitions that come out of the UK, and just meet all the amazing people that we have. Like, it's just, I mean, we've got our own fantasy football expo over here now. Like, it's genuinely baffling, the journey of the last 7 years of the fantasy football community in the UK, and the amount of people playing. And I've made genuine friends for life doing this. And yeah, it's pretty awesome. And we'll hit 1,000 next year. And that's going to be a proper party. We will have to do something very special for 1,000. But yeah, nice. Whenever you get these sort of milestones, it's always nice to hit them. There aren't many podcasts out there that have done 900 episodes. Let me tell you that. I think it's less than 1% of all the podcasts ever made have ever done 900 episodes.
Wow.
So it is quite a special note. And when we push on to 1,000, then that'll be a real party. We'll do something. But yes, enough sentimentality. This man has got it. Nino, my man, let's all go win these championships. We do need to dock some ships in the harbour, my man. And we've got a long 4 weeks to do that. But I'm genuinely excited for the amount of ships that could be coming home into the harbour, raise the flags, and fill those docks, because I think our listeners are having good seasons. I think if they've been following the content, there's been some misses. I was kindly reminded in our DMs last week or so, saying you talk about your wins a lot, but you don't talk about your losses. And it was because I told him not to pick up Johnny Smith, which obviously appears to be a bit of an L, which obviously it is. You know, you can only follow the data you've got. It is a big L when you didn't do that. And people that followed us on the Anthony Richardson train and Michael Pittman train, and that was one I was riding all the way. That's obviously not gone too well. And yeah, there's definitely been a few. Deebo Samuel's not quite panned out the way that we kind of hoped that would be as a pick. But yeah, I think on the whole, you're never going to be right 100% of the time. You're always going to get things wrong. We definitely have, but I feel like our analysis and our review point and our process has really led us to some really good spots, because for every Johnny Smith miss in the season, or for every Deebo Samuel and Michael Pittman miss, we've got a Brian Robinson and Alvin Kamara, and then some, and Chris Godwin for the few weeks of the season. And the Patreons have been benefiting more from the Westbrook Akeens and the Marcus Valdes-Scantlins and a few others that I was touting up ahead of time. So, yeah, I think, although I did tell a lot of people this week in my Fantasy Pros column to sit Jerry Jeudy, so I should also because, shadowing Pat Surtain, I didn't like that matchup. I wasn't the only one, but, Pat Surtain hadn't given up a top 12 performance. To be fair, I need to look at it snap by snap. I don't think he was culpable for a good amount of those yards that were shipped, but as a team unit, then obviously that was a wild game last night. That might be, that is classic Jameis. And I feel like the league benefits from Jameis. I'm just glad he's not my quarterback anymore, because that would have driven me up the wazoo, and I'm sure all Browns fans, because as a neutral, I finally get to enjoy Jameis as a neutral, and it is great. Like, in terms of its absolute box office, I genuinely enjoy watching Jameis just throw up chaos bombs everywhere. He's like the quarterback. He's like me as a commissioner, right? Just lob it all out there and just see what sticks. Nino's wanting to ask us a question, so sure, go ahead and drop it in the chat. And anyone else, if you've got questions, we'll try and get through as many of these as possible through it. But yeah, unbelievable game last night, but the Broncos prevail, scoring 40-ish points and lording it up, and they're going into a bye in good shape.
Yeah, that's week 14 bye. It's going to be murder for some this week, that is absolutely sure. Yeah, 497 passing yards. That's a lot. Jameis put up a lot of yards on a Broncos defense that's been quite stingy this year.
So there was a stat that he broke last night in terms of the total amount of yards in a game thrown by a quarterback, if you include the pick sixes. So Jameis Winston threw for 497 yards. The Broncos also had 171 interception return yards against him. The 668 combined passing yards plus interception return yards off of his passes is the most by any QB in a single game in NFL history. It's the Jameis Winston experience.
You can
strap yourself in.
You can make a stat out of anything these days, can't you? You could say he just well, he ran twice as many steps with his right leg, so that's the longest touchdown in history. Like, it's just, people will genuinely go after stats. But yeah, that is a lot of yards, Jameis. Well done.
So Nino's asked the question. I'm really trying to get a solid wide receiver playoff schedule. Would you send Brian Robinson plus Deebo for Drake London? If you'd asked me this, Nino, like 10 days ago, I would have gone, yeah, absolutely, probably would do that. Especially as Brian Robinson's got his bye. Deebo is not really firing on all cylinders. I would have definitely gone, yeah, okay, I would. There's just something going on in Atlanta right now. They've lost 3, so they haven't won in a month because of their bye. Kirk Cousins threw about as many interceptions as Jameis did.
He looks awful.
He looks awful. And the thing is, like, people are sitting there, like, calling for Penix, and you're like, but they're still technically top of the division because they got the tiebreaker over the Buccaneers. So, then they're in playoff contention. It's kind of a really difficult situation to sit here and say they've got to bench the quarterback. But he's really not in a good place. He could turn that around. The schedule is very, very soft for them, but it's a tough week this week. And then, yeah, their playoff schedule opens. But am I sitting here wanting to bank a title on Kirk Cousins' current form? Probably not. Like, I just think I'm just a bit concerned. It could pay off. But and I love taking a big move. But I also sit there and think, I just don't know if I want to put my entire fantasy title on him. I would do that trade for Mike Evans. if you're looking to improve at wide receiver, because they're going to try and just give Mike Evans the football in Tampa. He's had nearly 200 receiving yards since he's been back off injury, and he missed a hell of a lot of that game, not on Sunday, but the game before against the Giants, where they were getting him up to speed. So he's at like 170, 175 yards in his last 2 games. More than that, probably close to 180 yards in his last 2 games. And they're going to try and get him another 500 yards so he can keep that streak going of 1,000-yard seasons. So they're going to try and average him to 100 yards a game. Like that is going to happen. And their schedule is as good, if not better, than the Falcons. So I sit there and think, if I'm sitting there and I'm thinking about wide receivers I want to trade for in the NFC South based on schedule, I'm not sure I want to go with the team that is out of momentum. I think for me, I would much rather try and buy in on Mike Evans. There's some other players I would look at, and I've been trending this for a while, but Lab McConkey looks like a bona fide stud. His schedule looks pretty decent. I'd be quite happy to jump in on Lab McConkey. He might be a bit harder to prize. A sneaky buy low, if you're able to do some buy lows, would be someone like Keenan Allen, who I thought was pretty much dust a couple of weeks ago. And then all of a sudden they fired Shane Waldron, and now they fired Matt Eberflus. And it's weird. So the guy who's now the interim head coach at the Bears was 5 weeks ago. He was like I think he was a running back coach, or he was like an offensive passing coordinator or something like that. Like he basically was like a nobody. And in 5 weeks, he's been promoted from that to offensive coordinator to now interim head coach, which is quite a wild ride. He's got 2 promotions in 5 weeks. But the way that their tandem usage at the moment is very much Keenan Allen, DJ Moore. Roman Dunze is very much out of the picture, so we'll get into that later. But yeah, for me, I think if I'm trying to buy low on wide receivers, Mike Evans over Drake London, I think Drake London's going to cost you a premium, and I just don't know if I want to put my faith in Kirk Cousins.
No, definitely not.
You think when we've seen this so many times in the NFL, momentum is such a big driver at this part of the season. Atlanta haven't won in a month, and then they're now going to play Minnesota, who, don't get me wrong, Minnesota haven't been great. Like, they've not been great. But they have a knack of just winning football games. And I would expect them to turn over the Falcons. So then let's say they beat the Falcons on Sunday. So then the Falcons haven't won in 5 weeks. And that's a long time to go without winning. And then you have to quickly turn that momentum. And if they were putting up points and they were just losing games, really close games, that would be really different. I know they're losing close games, but they're scoring, scored 13 points on Sunday. And they looked abysmal. If we look at their returns over the last few games, it hasn't been pretty. So we look at Atlanta. I'm just going to pull this up. It's just their returns have just been really, really poor. And I'm just 13 points on Sunday. They put 6 points up against the Broncos. They put 17 points up against the Saints. The last win was 27 points against the depleted Cowboys team. So, if we look at Kirk Cousins and his passing TDs in the last 4 games, they're really not great at all. It's, 0 against the Saints, 0 against the Broncos. And then he put up 0 passing TDs on Sunday. So, it's not a great time for him at the moment. He's thrown, let's see, from that game in Atlanta, he's thrown 0 passing touchdowns. So 3 games, a long time without that. And yeah, that will change, but I just can't get on board with it.
No.
Sorry, Dino, that's a really long answer to your question, but I wanted to give it due thought and process.
Yeah, it's from what I saw in Red Zone of Kirk Cousins, he just looks out of sorts. He looks slow and out of sorts, and not on the same page as his receivers, which is a worry. Murph, before we get
coming off a bye, it's more of a worry coming off a bye. So I think, like, for me, they had a bye in week 12, and then to come out and play like that, is a big alarm bell. I think it's one thing to play badly before the bye, you're knackered, injuries happen, things have gone a bit awry. You use that time in the bye to start getting pieces together and get it right. If you come out of the bye and play just as bad, if not worse, there's some issues there. There's a lot of issues there. So yeah, I don't want to bank on it.
Yeah, fair enough. Before we get too far in, let's talk some FFCC 25. Putting up some big numbers this year.
Yeah, loads of money, and obviously we'll change the charity, and you and I will have to have a discussion as to what that will be for next year. But we got a donation since I did this, so we're up to 6,000. Oh, sorry, £8,080 in money raised in 2024, which is a phenomenal amount of money to.
Mm-hmm.
And pleasing that we passed £8,000 this week, because this week is Crohn's and Colitis Awareness Week. So it's really fitting that it started yesterday. Well, it started technically Sunday, but really the proper awareness started going out Monday. It was on the news yesterday, and all the bits and pieces. So it was great to see this awareness week start, and then us hit that 8K milestone. So we are the final drive to getting people signed up for next year's tournament. This is we've got a couple of signed jerseys we're giving away, a Dax Hill jersey and a Jalen Tolbert jersey. So if you enter our FFCC competition, link is in the show notes if you're watching this live, or it'll be in the show notes on the podcast, or on our pinned X and everywhere else. But if you sign up and donate by Sunday Night Football, this Sunday on the 8th of December, you'll have a chance to win one of those jerseys. So we'll spin the wheel next week and see who wins what.
Ooh, the spinning wheel of not doom, but excitement. Just...
So yeah, but it's a thank you to everyone for signing up, donating. We are down to the final four of the FFCC and the main event and the plate and the final two of Squid Game. Squid Game winner could be decided this week in our penalty shootout style final format. And then, the final four of the plate and the FFCC main event are especially the main event, two very close games. There's one bit of a blowout in the plate. The other one is a bit closer. So all to play for in that one. So yeah, we'll in a week and a bit's time, we'll know who the finalists are going to be and start crowning some winners.
Well, anybody with CMC, Jordan Mason, Taysom Hill, or Theo Johnson is in a bit of a pickle. Those four are heading to IR. Their regular season looking likely done. Big news on the cusp of NFL fantasy playoffs, Murf.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the CMC news is going to be gutting if, we go back to the season that David Johnson was the 101, and I think he got injured in the first game of the season, and then basically never came back. So I think CMC is going to be the worst 101 since then. I think probably without question. And it's unfortunate. And then Jordan Mason going out, that's really unfortunate. So Isaac Guerrero is going to be the guy this week. So, my advice to anyone listening is go empty the clip. Just go and put all your fab, whatever you got left on it. Go get him. He's going to be the starter in San Francisco the next 4 games. Don't sit there and think what else could come along. There's just not many more opportunities you're going to get fab and to get a player that could be, an RB2 or better coming down the stretch. So, Guerrero is got to be the guy. They're so weak in depth, the 49ers. They've got a guy on practice squad. I think it's Patrick Taylor, I think his name is, off the top of my head. Patrick Taylor Jr., I seem to think his name is. So maybe he's worth a sprinkle somewhere just to see if he gets some game time. I don't know. Then, don't forget there's no trades, so they can't trade it. They can't trade for one, and I don't think they would with their situation. They could go and sign playoff Lenny or someone like that, but by the time they get up to speed off the couch and they've not played for so many weeks, the season's going to be over. And what really annoys me, right? So for me, I get really angry with Kyle Shanahan so much because I think Kyle Shanahan is given a free pass in the media for someone who is not won a Super Bowl as a head coach. And my issue with Kyle Shanahan is he threw away a Super Bowl by negative coaching. And I feel like Shanahan's a bit of a flat track bully. In games where he is, where they're expected to win, they win with a flourish and they play well and they put up loads of points. And then they seem to always get this pass for mistakes made. Like they trade all that capital for Trey Lance and it's not worked. And they get a pass because they drafted Brock Purdy with Mr. Irrelevant. And it's like, oh, well, look how good Kyle Shanahan is winning all these games with Brock Purdy at Mr. Irrelevant. And you sit there and think, well, yeah, but they shouldn't have been in that situation to begin with because they picked a guy at 3, traded up all that capital, 3 first-round picks, and lost out and not done anything with him. And I just think that the way that he talks is so arrogant. Like, at times, like he said, oh, well, Christian McCaffrey's going to be out for a minimum of 6 weeks, but we hope to have him back for the playoffs. I'm sitting there thinking, like, probably not going to make the playoffs. Mm-hmm. And I know you can't really talk like that. Like, I understand that you can't sit there and say, like, oh, well, our season's done and things like that. But they've lost 3 straight games. They're bottom of the NFC West. They're 2 games behind the division leader. And the wild card is well out of reach. So they've got to win the division to get in. And I think the arrogance of saying, like, oh, he's going to be out for 6 weeks. Just say he's out for the regular season. Like, he's out for the regular season. And that you can just leave it there. And then you're not having to sit there and answer questions. Like, 6 weeks says to me, you're thinking playoffs. And I'm thinking, you can't afford to think playoffs. Because you have to run the table to really get a chance to make the playoffs. Like, you can maybe have 1 more loss, but you've lost 7. You can maybe lose 1. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, why? Why are you talking about 6-week timetables? Like, end of season. It's just that arrogance. He's thinking about the playoffs. I'm like, you're not entitled to think about the playoff, sunshine. You've got to sit there and think about winning next week because you've lost 3 in a row and you look dreadful. And I just don't, I look at their schedule and you think, okay, they got the Bears, they could beat them. Then they got the Rams. That's a tough game. Winnable, but they've already lost to them this season, I believe. Or did they beat the Rams? No, the Rams beat them already in the season. Then they got the Dolphins. I mean, the Dolphins might have phoned it in at that point. Then they got the Lions, who will be trying to clinch a 1 seed.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think they're favourites in many of their games. They're favourites next week, and they're favourites. And then they got the Cardinals in week 18. I think they're favourites in 1 game, maybe a slight favourite against the Dolphins. I don't know. That's my soapbox rant.
That's all right. Murph, soapbox rant of the week. No, it's difficult because I think I would be more towards the Shanahan way, but I wouldn't be so arrogant with my final statement about it because I am very much a positive, a positive enforcer when it comes to speaking and stuff, but I wouldn't be necessarily saying playoffs. And I don't know whether maybe slip of the tongue or whatever because he's been there so often, but yeah, I agree with the fact he's been given a bit of a pass. Regular season. Yeah, that would. He
always is in the media.
Yeah, he is. You're right. You're right.
He's always given a pass in the media.
Yeah. Week 13, Murph. Let me have your reaction. What surprised you?
Let's talk about Josh Jacobs at the moment, right? Because Josh Jacobs had a really tough game against the Dolphins on the ground. So 19 rushing attempts for 43 yards is not great. The Dolphins D were pretty good in this one. And then the one touchdown, which is great. But then he also had a season high 74 receiving yards on 4 receptions. So he put up 21 fantasy points. 21.7 to be exact. But his snaps are going through the roof. So his snap share is going up and up and up every single week. In fact, he set his season high in each of the last 2 weeks. Including a 77% snap share last week or on Sunday, which is phenomenal, right? For a running back, it's pretty good. In 5 of his last 6 games, he's managed 1 touchdown and 20.2 fantasy points. And he's hit 90 scrimmage yards in each of his last 7 games.
It's pretty good.
It's sneakily, like, again, it's something that's not getting talked about. Is we talk about like elite fantasy performances, and we're talking about Jerry Jeudy's 200 odd yards and Jameis Winston. And no one's pulling up the fact that Aaron Jones is sneakily putting together a really silent but deadly high-end RB1 end of season flourish here. With those kind of numbers, he is going to be a force to be reckoned with in fantasy playoffs, and something to keep in mind. So, if you've got Josh Jacobs, you're in a pretty good spot. You know this. If you haven't, you're coming against him. Just mind out, because he's getting a lot of usage at the moment, and it is really, really good usage on his side.
You went old school then, Murf, and you accidentally said Aaron Jones in the middle of that.
Oh, did I? Josh Jacobs. People need to stop changing teams.
Yeah, talking about somebody who hasn't changed teams and was drafted by the team they're on, Bucky Irving.
Oh my God, I love Bucky Irving. Do you know how I was so excited when we draft Bucky Irving, right? I was so excited. I went on to the Dynasty Hot Seat podcast hosted by my good friend Connor, or Mags, back in January, right? So this was January. And I just get bored and I watch his show, and I get bored because everyone comes on in a Superflex draft. He does like a 1-round Superflex fantasy draft, and everyone does like the same thing. Everyone's like, oh yeah, it's going to be, Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams and Brock Bowers. And I'm sitting there like, this is just boring. Like, let's just pull some random name. And I was like, I just love Bucky Irving. And if he lands in the right situation, he will be a first round fantasy pick. And obviously he fell the 4th round and he was obscure, which is phenomenal because I took him in like nearly every rookie draft. I had some picks. But he is playing. If you were to redraft the first round of rookie drafts now, I guarantee you he'd finish in the top half of fantasy drafts right now, because he is absolutely crushing it. So one thing I'll say, right, I'll pull these stats up and then I'll go with the ones on the sheet. Rookie scrimmage yardage leaders for the 2024 season is Bucky Irving has more scrimmage yards than Brock Bowers and Lad McConkey. He's 1,017 scrimmage yards on the season. He has 732 of those are rushing yards, which is the leading rusher of this rookie class. Jaden Daniels is 3rd in that group, by the way. And he also has the most touchdowns, rushing touchdowns, with Jaden Daniels in terms of rookies this season. So it's quite an impressive array. And yes, I get it. The running back classes have been good. Jonathan Brooks hasn't really played, so it's Tracy and Irving, etc. But in the 2 games since the Week 11 bye, Bucky Irving has 240 rushing yards on 37 carries, which is 6.4 yards per carry, which is just mad. He's got 2 rushing TDs. He's 9 of 9 receiving for 97 yards. And he's only dropped, or not caught, I should say, 2 passes all season. He's 35 of 37 on the season. Like, this guy's phenomenal. And he missed time in this game because the stupid... I get annoyed with the Buccaneers at times. They decided that their RB1 is going to be the guy who's going to do kick returns. And then he got a hip injury on kick return. So he missed most of the second half. And then he came back in overtime. But Bucky Irving has been absolutely phenomenal. He is RB1 in Tampa going forward. Now, it's a hard situation because he's playing about the same amount of snaps as Rachaad White, but he's just more efficient. And actually, it's working quite nicely. The Buccaneers have done something they've not been able to do since the Dark Ages, which is actually run the football with a modicum of success. They've been one of the worst rushing teams, probably the worst rushing team in the NFL over the last 5 years. I'd have to qualify that stat, but I reckon they're probably right up there in terms of running the football. They've been really bad, and they've got a lot better. And this season, and you got Sean Tucker behind them as well, who has a pretty nifty average himself. So the Buccaneers at this moment are running this football as good as anyone in the NFL. It's just now a question of Bucky Irving is really the guy going forward. He's going to be handcuffed slightly because Rashad White's not going anywhere, but he's still a startable option. It's just a shame because if he had Jonathan Taylor, CMC volume, he'd be the outright RB1. But he doesn't, so he's going to be a high-end RB2 with RB1 upside every week.
Yeah,
but phenomenal performance. Yeah, but phenomenal performance. You can't go wrong with that. And then let's talk about some Chargers because
Dobbins.
They can't run the football without Dobbins. It's really funny. So Gus Edwards, Keanu Vidal, and Hassan Haskins had just 11 carries against the Falcons. And then the Chargers only threw the ball 23 times. This is what's hilarious about this game. The Chargers won this game running like 42 plays. It's just like, how can you win a game only running 42 plays? So, and they only ran 34 offensive plays, and then us taking out punts, field goals, and stuff like that, right? So, it's mad. I mean, like, Justin Herbert only threw the ball 23 times, and McConkey had 12. He had 12 of the targets, 12 of the 23. So he had over 50% target share in this game, which is it's just mental. This is a long way of saying, basically, the Chargers, it's a really easy team to start your lineup every week. It's Justin Herbert in a super flex, and it's Lad McConkey, and you can pretty much forget everybody else because they're not relevant. If you're desperate, try and throw Will Dissly in and see if he lands a touchdown, but don't hope too much. It's just bizarre. It's just funny. That's all.
It's such a few number. I guess against the Falcons team that never looked really scary, so maybe they didn't have to. They were efficient on their drive. So
the Falcons should have won this game, but they didn't. Like if we look at the stats from this game, it is genuinely bonkers. So the Falcons had 24 first downs to the Chargers 10. Falcons ran 77 plays to 46 total. Falcons had 350 yards to the Chargers 187. Both teams had 10 drives. The Chargers had 56 yards rushing versus 116 for the Falcons. In the red zone, made an attempt. The Falcons didn't have, or the Falcons were 1 for 4, and the Chargers were 0 for 2. The Chargers, the only thing they won all day was penalties. They had 7. And I guess they won the turnover battle because they took the ball away 4 times. And then they had a defensive touchdown, don't forget, in this, and they only had 24 minutes possession. I mean, it's bizarre how you win a football game like that, but there you go. But yeah, I guess that they'll have better weeks ahead, the Chargers, but really, I think if I'm sitting here advising people, like, who do you start from the Chargers? It's Lad McConkey and just forget everyone else. Easiest way forward.
You've got here as your main learning, start your studs.
Yeah, and it's a reminder that we have to do all the time. And I get questions all the time from people, and people just get too cute with things, and you're just like, start your studs. Like, I had some lineup questions sent to me over the weekend, and I was just like, you just got to start your studs. Don't overthink it. And it's just a case of I will always sleep well at night knowing that I started like Joe Burrow and he didn't do well, rather than starting someone like Jameis Winston who outperformed him this week, and then look at that and just think, nah, I think for me, you just got to start your studs. You just got to start the players who you drafted high, and count on them. That's what you drafted them for. And I get there's always the matchup thing, right? And there's always some pieces of matchup where you got to look at and think, like I sat Deebo Samuel in a few places because of the weather. We knew it was going to be biblically bad. We knew that there was going to be a low volume of passing attempts. I sat him in the Scottish Bowl and I shouldn't, because return yards mean everything. And he got like 200 return yards and it was like 40 points on my bench. But in every other league, I sat him. It worked out because in the few leagues I had to start him because I didn't have anyone else, he scored like 0 or 1 point. And there's situations where you go, okay, maybe like extreme weather is a good one, where you know that the passing volume is going to be way, 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 way down. That's a different consideration. But in a standard week, just start the players that you drafted high, because you'll always feel better starting them and losing than benching them and them going off. And I think it's just sometimes you've just got to do that. I think it's really important.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you get kicked in the face by Tua, who statistically has been terrible in the cold. The Dolphins still lost in the cold, but Tua had an absolutely amazing week. So, yeah, hate that.
I know.
But hey, crazy.
Yeah, it happens. But Tua hasn't been great. Like, I wouldn't say he's a must-start play every week. Like, I think if he's your QB1 on your roster, then that's different. But you know, when I talk about studs, I'm talking about like the Joe Burrows, the Lamar Jacksons of this world. I'm talking about,
for sure.
Yeah, I'm talking about those premium players that you picked in the first 2 rounds of your fantasy draft. You know, those are the ones that I don't think you can ever question starting under any circumstance, unless it's heavy snow. You know, if someone said to me, I want to bench Deebo Samuel, I would have gone, yeah, that probably makes some sense. There's a logical pathway to that. But, you know, like you look at this week, for example, and you think about, you know, would you sit someone like Alvin Kamara? No. Like under any circumstance, probably not. Because he's having a phenomenal season.
Somebody who's on the bubble for, you know, statistically, potentially something we need to monitor. Kyron Williams, obviously he was drafted really high. Is he still start worthy?
Oh, he's massively start worthy. So, look, there's a couple of things here with this. So I've been talking about on the Patreon casts this philosophy that I have, that I don't believe there are many players that will get over 350 touches in a season. And statistically, it's like 2 a year for the last 5 or 6 years. I think 1 year it was 3. And then this year, there's been a really high number of touches. I think there's about 13 players that are projected to get pretty close to that 350 number. It's not sustainable. So there's a lot of touch regression that's going to happen. And I think what the Rams are doing here is they understand that Kyron Williams has never played a 17-game season. You know, the most he's ever managed in a season is 12 games. And they understand that. And they understand that he is one of their best weapons. And so they're managing his workload to ensure that he doesn't overcook. And so actually he dropped to the lowest amount of snaps that he's played this season. So he actually went down to 67.3% of snaps played, which is the first time he's been below 80 all season. Here's the other side of the coin. So it looks like Blake Corum is coming in relatively early in games. So Blake, like, you look at the box score, and if you haven't watched the game, you would sit there and go, did Blake Corum come in during garbage time? Did he come in? You know, when is he coming in games? Because he's getting more and more touches. He's actually coming in and he's running like the second and third series of games. So, you know, Kyron Williams is out there for the first drive. Then it looks like it's Blake Corum for either the second or the third. In this case, at the weekend, it was mostly both those drives. And then you sit there and you go, okay, so what's happening here? And then what happened is after that drive, Williams then took over. So after the third drive of the game, there were 17 carries by the running backs in this game, and Williams had 14 of them. So what they're doing is they're putting Corum out there for the plays that aren't going to be running plays. So Corum is out there. Corum is getting some work, and he might see an increased workload but Kyron Williams is still getting the plays that kind of matter. What this does mean a little bit is that Corum is going to be a little bit nudged down because he's not going to see that elite workload that we were seeing at the start of the season. It's probably good for owners that this is happening to a degree because it's reducing his injury risk. But what I will say is there is a chance that this isn't just a sort of temporary thing and Corum could get some more work. And there's a few players I highlighted on the Patreon cast, and I talked about all the players I would be having as backup running backs. And we did this last week on the show of the key running back backups that you would have for the situations that you need because of these touch rates are quite extreme. And I think what's really important to understand is now is, and we saw it again with the 49ers had empty all the money for Guerrero, but anytime you've got a running back who can walk into an elite situation, if there's an injury, has to be owned. So Blake Corum is one because there isn't anyone behind Blake Corum really that matters. Roddy Rivers is not going to get a big load behind Blake Corum. You have a look at what's going on. You know, for me, Sean Tucker walks into a decent role. If one of those two running backs gets injured, he's got to be owned. Zach Charbonnet for Kenneth Walker's got to be owned. You know, Trey Benson for James Conner's got to be owned. All of these players, because when these players either start running out of season because the season's over, they might see reduced workload, or for the playoffs, they might see reduced workload if their spot is stuck. So keep an eye on it and definitely own those running backs because it's a really crucial thing. You've got to do it this time of the season. You know, if you don't Isaac Guerrero right now and didn't have to go to waivers, you'd be laughing. But you couldn't anticipate. We talked about Jordan Mason and he's a must add, but obviously then he gets injured in the same game. And that's just frightfully unlucky. Like that's criminally unlucky to see two running backs in the same game go to IR. Because if that had just been Christian McCaffrey, you follow your advice, you'd have walked straight into a Jordan Mason situation.
Yeah, for sure. Any other players or trends you want to touch on, Murf?
I'll just say one more piece of advice is watch the weather, really important.
Yes, the weather.
Because again, the amount of injuries, but then also just weather dependent is going to change game scripts quite significantly. We're hitting that month of December with extreme cold. If it's in a bowl, it doesn't matter. If it's indoors, it doesn't matter. But in those key areas, key games where they are held in winter, you're looking at Green Bay, you're looking at Chicago, you're looking at those older stadiums, MetLife, where there is a weather component to the game, New England. You know, they're the ones you've got to kind of watch out for and just monitor the weather. And there's a guy on Twitter, Matt Thornton, Matt T90. I think that's his handle. If it's not, people will know who I'm talking about, hopefully. He does an amazing weather report on X. If you can't find it, then hit me a DM and I'll send it to you. But he does an amazing weather report every week, and go read that. It's really, really important. It's a good part of the good analysis that he does and get underneath. So yeah, that's a really big one. Watch the weather.
Nice. This is a extensive list you have here, Mr. Murf. You want to do it all?
Yeah, we can bang through these. These are just amusing, some thoughts that I've gone through the games and that I've watched so far and looked at some stats. There's some things I'm going to pull out here. So DK Metcalf still doesn't look healthy. So he's only playing 75% of snaps in the last two games. He's typically around about 86% of snaps. So he's clearly on some form of a count. So he's capped upside until that goes back up into the 80s. So one to watch. I talked about Roman Dunze being the guy in the Bears offense a few weeks ago. That has really gone south with all these coaching changes and why coaching changes are so important. So it's Allen and Moore, the 1-2 punch, and Dunze is down on snaps, he's down on targets, he's down on receptions. So for context, DJ Moore's targets per route run was 34% on Sunday. Odunze's was just 14%, which is terrible. So really tough spot there. Breece Hall, obviously, he had an injury, so 61% of snaps he played, so something to monitor on the injury report going forward, because that's a really low snap count for him. People will be rejoicing for Sam Laporta, thinking the Renaissance is on. It's not on. He scored 2 touchdowns. That's kind of just lucky. He still only managed 17% targets per route run, which is low. Only 6 targets, which is low. And it's his first game with 3 grabs or more since October. So again, it's just these trends don't jump to one game isn't a trend. One game is a point. And when you see a trend of 2-3 games, then we can take it seriously. But if it's just one game, then we kind of just need to have a bit of reality to it. Wandale Robinson was not liked by Drew Lock on Sunday. So Wandale Robinson, 2 targets. He got 5% targets per route run. So his is going to be quarterback dependent. Tommy Cutlets liked him a lot more from the game that we saw on against Tampa. So if Tommy Cutlets plays on Sunday, then maybe Wandale Robinson gets a trend up. If it's Drew Lock, then maybe just bench Wandale Robinson and see what happens. I was really shocked by this one. Brandon Cooks on his return, he made a surprise return, almost with like no fanfare. 30% target per route run on his return. So for me, he's a must-add on the waiver wires this week. He's clearly going to get some volume. He's clearly going to be a target at Cooper Rush. I don't know what that translates to a high-end fantasy performance, but I'd rather he be on my bench than in someone else's lineup against me, and he goes off. So, yeah, it's a big one. Jalen Waddle had a big performance in week 12. He faded into obscurity again this week. Johnny Smith has pretty much killed his role. He had 13 targets, I think, in this game, Johnny Smith. So Waddle is pretty much a firm sit and see again. He's a player you'd much rather have on your bench. Not, even if he goes off on your bench, than dropping him and letting someone scoop him up, start him, and go big. He's always got that big performance in him, but he's only had 2 fantasy relevant finishes this season. So, in 13 weeks is pretty poor. So, again, I don't feel comfortable starting Jalen Waddle in any lineups for the foreseeable future. This Texans and Jags game was absolutely mental, and all the headlines are about Azeez Al-Jalai, who put in a nasty hit against Trevor Lawrence, who was giving up the slide. He's been suspended for 3 games, rightly so. For that, D'Amico Ryans coming out and defending his player was wild. Tried to put the blame on Trevor Lawrence and said that he should learn how he should learn to slide properly. So yeah, that's one I'm a bit like, okay. And then the brawl was based on the Jags players and not anything to do with his players. I thought that was wild. Anyway, one of our patrons, Danny, asked me about the Texans. He's like, I just don't know about like the Texans going forward. Do I trust Tank Dell going forward? And I was like, okay. I went through and I looked at this game and I looked at the stats from this game. All right. I broke this down because this game was mental. It didn't really make a lot of sense. It was a strange game because both teams were low scoring. The Texans kind of got it done. Trevor Lawrence gets knocked out. The Jags don't have any offense with Mac Jones. It's pretty poor. And the Texans hold on. But they actually had a 10.8% passing rate over expected, which means they threw the ball significantly with intent. Didn't always work, but at least they had the intent to get the ball down the field. Nico Collins, he had 11 targets. He had 35% target per route run, which is great. So he really put up some good numbers in this game. Tank Dell's numbers weren't shabby. They weren't incredible, but they weren't terrible in this game. I've just lost it because I put it on the sheet and then I took it off, and then I thought I better talk about Tank Dell. So let's find it quickly. Scroll through this one. Right. So Tank Dell's was 4 targets, but he had 119 air yards, which is impressive. His air dot was almost 30 in this game, which is mad, right? So you want there to be a bit more volume, and I think it will come in this, but it just didn't happen for him in this particular game. Dalton Schultz got quite a bit underneath. I think that the targets per route run will shoot up for Tank Dell in future weeks. This is a particularly efficient game for Dalton Schultz, which doesn't sort of normally happen. On the flip side, Parker Washington is an interesting ad. So he ran 91% routes, 12 targets, 151 air yards, So he looks like he's going to be a bit of a focal point. So if you're in a PPR league, he could be really interesting. In other leagues, he's not. And then the running back situation there is crazy. Everyone is still pivoting towards Tank Bigsby. I don't really understand why, because Travis Etienne, he clearly got some form of injury. No one's disclosing it. That's my guess. He only played 53% of touches, but he had 16 touches to Tank Bigsby's 8. So I don't get this whole like Tank Bigsby's a thing. Like he's not a thing. Like if people want to keep adding him, that's fine. But he's not a thing. Like he's just not. So if you want to keep adding Tank Bigsby and playing him every week, all for you. That role is pretty bad. Yeah, give me. Not willingly, I probably wouldn't start either of them, but if I had to pick one, it'd be Travis Etienne. Got a question from Rob here. Is that I've been riding the Texans DST all year in a few years, and waivers look slim. Currently, Bills, Dolphins, Cardinals, Saints, and Titans all available. Any thoughts or names out of a hat? It depends if you want a 1 week streamer or if you're looking for a longer term streamer. So for me, if you're looking at a 1 week stream, the Saints is probably the top of the list. This week, that looks like the matchup for me. I would say definitely this week. If it's a 1 week play, just to cover your bye, especially against the Giants, like that just seems a gimme. If you're looking for longer term streams, I really like the Cardinals, the Jags, and the Titans as streams. The Dolphins are up there as well. Their schedule's not bad coming in as well. So there's a few there, but I mean the Cardinals are on bye, so I don't think they're going to help you this week with the Texans DST on bye as well. So one week player go with the Saints. I'm sorry, the Cardinals aren't on bye. They're week 12.
No, they're not. Yeah,
sorry.
They've got the Seahawks, the Patriots, Panthers, and the Rams to finish.
Yes, it's decent. Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to think. I got them muddled with Washington. Yeah,
that's right.
I would say, I'd say the Saints is a 1 week play. I would say I like the Cardinals. They've got the best schedule as a longer term streamer, probably better than, and that D's played sneakily good this season. So I quite like them over the Texans DST rest of season. That's kind of where I'm at. Yeah. Let's talk about Anthony Richardson.
Oh, do we have to?
Well, we have to because he's fantasy relevant despite only passing for 109 passing yards. So Shane Steichen has decided that he's just going to play him as a running back and he's just going to run the ball a lot. So he had a rushing TD, he had a rushing 2-point conversion, but he had just 12 completions. He had 388 air yards on his 12 completions, which is just mad. So I would say that going forward that it's really hard to trust the wide receivers there. But Anthony Richardson's going to be a play because they're just going to run the legs out of him. But yeah, it's going to be hard to trust Pittman and Downs and everyone going forward for the rest of the season in big spots. I like Downs when he comes back because he gives him a really fluid option. But yeah, that Michael Pittman pick is looking worse and worse as the weeks go on. It'd be really hard. Chris Rodriguez Jr. was someone I put in a post and I posted everywhere that if Brian Robinson doesn't go, then he's the guy to pick up. He's going to be ahead of Jeremy McNichols in this offense. And then we saw Brian Robinson played, and then we see this really weird stat line that Chris Rodriguez had 13 attempts for 94 yards and a touchdown, and people are now really excited about Chris Rodriguez. I'm going to pour some water on this because it'd be really easy to take a victory lap and say, yeah, I did pick him up. He's had this great game. But in all truth, this was all garbage time. It was all against backup D. Well done to him for achieving it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to belittle the accomplishment of what he's done. My point is that is not going to happen every week. They're coming off a bye. I still like Rodriguez. I think there's a role for him that's over McNichols. I think he's a better running back than McNichols. I think he'll get more stats. I still think he's nice to own, but don't be expecting 13 for 94 and 1 every week because I just don't know if that opportunity is there with Washington down the stretch. But if you already owned him, then great, hold on to him. This one's wild, right? So according to Fantasy Points data, there are 28 running backs that have seen at least 5 rushing attempts inside the 10-yard line since week 9. 2 of those running backs are Jonathan Taylor and Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara has had 5 and Jonathan Taylor's had 9. They're the only ones of those 28 running backs that have yet to have a touchdown in that sequence. The reason I highlight this is that is biblically horrendous bad luck. Like, biblically bad. Like, to have that many rushing attempts and not get in, that's not a sign of good, that's not a sign of a bad running back. That's just a sign of combination of good defense. There could be penalties in there, officiating calls. There's all sorts of things that kind of go on that just have not led to that one going in. I will tell you this. There is rushing touchdown regression back to the mean happening for both these players if those numbers continue to trend. They kind of happen in peaks and troughs, these rushing touchdowns. So, this leads more to sticking with Jonathan Taylor. So people will be really disappointed with Jonathan Taylor. Since week 9, he's only averaging 10 fantasy points. I get it. He's on a bye this week, right? But he is seeing 93% of the workload, which is incredible. His schedule going forward is Denver, where they are weirdly, I don't know why, favorites. Then they've got Tennessee, and then they've got the Colts.
Oh, disrespect.
They're 2.5-point favorites over the Broncos. So then they've got Tennessee, which they're favorites by 4, and then the Giants, which they're favored by like 5 or 6 in the futures market. So you look at those and you think there's a lot of game script for Jonathan Taylor coming up that is positive. So Jonathan Taylor is sneakily a potential league winner for people. So if you have an ability to still do trades in your league, Jonathan Taylor's a good one to trade for. The schedule looks good. The usage is good. There's some positive regression to the mean that it's due. All by Jonathan Taylor. And get on the horse now, because I think he can deliver a fantasy title for players in week 17. And breathe.
And breathe. Does Anthony Richardson's running not worry you with Taylor, or are you?
No.
Are you okay with it?
Yeah, there's plenty of room for Taylor. Taylor's got a defined role. If Anthony Richardson was throwing the ball 30 times a game, I'd be significantly worried, but he's throwing the ball 12 times a game. So if he throws the ball for 12 times a game, he's not going to run for much more than that. That's still 15, 20 plays for Jonathan Taylor to get his. Plus, he will get some of those 12 receptions in the receiving game as well. He scored a receiving touchdown, I think, at the weekend. So, yeah, there's a pathway to Jonathan Taylor getting 20 touches in each of the next 3 games, regardless of what's going on with those games. The only scenario that really hurts Taylor with Richardson is a blowout. So if Denver are up 30-0, that's a situation that's really bad. Right? In week 15, that could be a bit dicey, but whatever. Week 16 against the Titans, I don't see that scenario happening. Week 17 against the Giants, I really don't see that one happening. I think they're going to run the wheels off him.
Nice.
Because Anthony Richardson is turnover worthy, and in games that they're in control, they just keep it on the ground.
Yeah, that's true. Safety first.
Absolutely.
Safety and rushing numbers. Murf, is there anything else you want to talk about?
I was just having a think. Do you know what? I think I'll save it for the Patreon cast. We're almost an hour in, so I think heed advice of picking up those running backs. Empty the money on Guerrero. I'll tell you what. I'll do some stream picks for the week. I know we kind of covered DST, so Rob's asked that question. If you're looking for some stream picks this week, quarterback, obviously Russ Wilson's doing well, or Jameis, they're good streaming quarterback picks. You can go with them. DSTs, 1 week plays, I've got the Saints and the Dolphins. Longer term plays, I've got the Cardinals, the Colts, the Bengals pretty decent, and the Titans as well. Kickers, Chase McLaughlin, Blake Groupie and Jason Myers are the ones I would go for kickers. Tight end, pick up Juwan Johnson now that Taysom Hill is out. You should see more work. If you want to have a snigger with me, and I shouldn't make fun of people's names, the Giants' backup tight end, who's currently number 1 on their depth chart, is a guy called Chris Manhertz. So you can pick him up. He might get some work. I don't know what he's going to get, but I'll take a spin in a few leagues for a tight end. Wide receivers just load up on MBS. Nick Westbrook-Akine, who has 20 catches on the year, 8 of those are touchdowns. So bag those. I also like Adam Thielen. And if you want to buy yourself a discount this week, you can get Devon Vile. He is obviously on bye, so you can just park him up on your bench for a week. He's getting more and more work. And then also as well, we talked about Brandon Cooks and Parker Washington. There's some options for you, as are Elijah Moore and Adam Thielen. Running backs if you need them. We talked about Guerrero, Blake Core and Ray Davis, Kimani Vidal. I don't know why, but it's just something to me that says they don't trust Gus Edwards, and if he breaks a few, you never know what might happen. Tyler Algier, Chris Rodriguez Jr. and Sincere McCormick are the ones to pick up at running back.
100%. As Murph said, Rush Nation, sign up before the games on Sunday to the FFCC 25. Get your name in the draw for those 2 jerseys. The Patreon cast, we are still running the 3 weeks trial. Head over to patreon.com/5yardrush. Sign up for that. It is free for a week. Binge all of the podcasts over there. Murph is going to do some stuff from advanced analytics from Fantasy Points data, which will be an intense but incredibly knowledgeable time. Let me tell you that.
Here's the thing on that. Just I know because we're wrapping up is you can sign up for the free trial, see if you like it. If you like it, you can sign up for a month after that free trial for £3 a month, and then in January I'll be pausing the subscriptions until April or May anyway. So you'll actually get access to the Patreon for £3 after a week's trial for like 5 months.
Well, there
and
you
all
go.
the old playbooks are on there as
month.
well. Yeah, and the playbooks are on there. The old ones, which still hold weight and still have lots of value. So you can go and read those for £3. And download and keep them, so you'll always have something for your money as well. So there is literally no better time to join the Patreon, because you get a lot of additional value, and you'll get access to me in our WhatsApp chat, and we can talk strategy and bits and pieces through the season, through the off season.
Insane value for your £3 for the rest of the season, Rush Nation. Oh man, 1 game of the regular season to go. I can't believe we're sitting here 900 episodes in, and after I started a podcast about my little fantasy league that was completely irrelevant for everybody else bar the 8 people in it. And genuinely, when we started this, putting podcasts out was hard work. You had to edit it precisely. You had to then load it into a format. You then had to change the format, edit stuff in, put it online, spread it out. Whereas now, I genuinely think, all right, now it's the end of the regular season, but if you have a little fantasy league that you have a good group of mates with, do a podcast with someone else from that league just about your league. It is the most fun thing to do, and you can record it on your phone and you can send it out, and there is no work. It is so easy now to do a podcast. Just do one with your friends about your league. It makes the league so fun.
Yeah, it really does. Are you in any leagues where there's a podcast about the league anymore?
Yeah, I'm in one. Pitsy's home league. He does a podcast with Storm, and it's fantastic because there's absolutely no science to it. It is just them talking trash about everybody in the league every week, and it's fantastic. It's pretty R-rated. And what makes it even funnier is they have a few people who listen from around the world, and it makes no sense to anybody who isn't in the league. But yeah, it is so fun. And what it does is it means the league has a hub to get round. So, you know, sometimes we have dynasty leagues where nothing happens. There's no chat. There's no people set their lineups, play the games, yada, yada, yada. Whereas, yeah, I think if you have a little podcast about your league, it just makes it fun. So if you have the opportunity, do try it. Because as you can see from me and Murph, 7 years in, we're still doing it. And it is,
I know, right?
it's very fun.
And that wasn't even in your league then.
No, I know, exactly. Which is...
I wasn't even in your league. Although I have come in and since dethroned you in that league.
Yeah, but that's fine. I mean, I've got one of the highest win percentages I've ever seen in fantasy football in 3 rings. So I'm happy. You know, this is just, it's one of those things. You can't, your team will fall off a cliff. It always does. And when I say fall off, mine got in a tank and drove very slowly over the edge and then fell really quickly as it was in a heavy tank. So, yeah, it was tough. But hey, here we are, 900 in. Here's the next 100. I reckon for 1,000, Murph, we should do a live one together somewhere.
Let's do it. Well, I think if we do it, for me, I think we'll talk about it, but I think we do a 2-parter. We do half of it live.
Okay.
And we do the other half. I'm literally going to get everybody in the world, not everyone in the world. I'm going to get some seriously great guests and try and see how many people I can get on and do like recorded segments or something like that for a best of 1,000.
Okay, sounds great. Editorially, I already hate you for the suggestion. If you really want to listen to some messed up audio, Rush Nation, we did a live 32 team NFL mock draft round 1, and it took, I don't know, something like 4 hours to actually do and about 95 hours to edit. So it was wild.
We'll make it easy.
Yeah.
As you say, it's easier to do now than ever before. Yes. That was wild, though.
That was, yeah. Especially the guy who drilled in from somewhere in America who had absolutely no idea what the hell was going on. That was brilliant.
Yeah, on his phone. That was pretty mental.
Yeah. If you are still watching on the live stream, we appreciate you dialing in. You get to see me and Murph visually, which, let me be honest, adds to the excitement. If you don't know what Murph does at the end of the podcast, if you're not watching, come watch us on YouTube, hit the bell, subscribe, hit the thumbs up, like, tell your friends, tell your mum to tell their friends. I saw a thing about Kaylee Coco on the Kelly Clarkson podcast. 2 of the most famous people, female actresses in America, and they were talking about fantasy football. So if they do it, there's a whole load of people who do it as well. Tell them to get involved.
Were they talking about 5 Yard Rush?
I only saw a snippet, so I imagine they were, just not in the bit I saw.
Okay, fine. Yeah, maybe we get them on for the 1,000th episode.
I think that is possible. I'm going to leave that with you. Rush Nation, get yourselves in those playoffs. It is now or never. Week 14 is, well, basically within touching distance. We're right there. It's time to do it. It's time to get some ships. Let's fill those docks. Until next week, when we talk playoff football, as always, don't forget, keep rushing.